Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, and Max Barr of Southeastern 14 here to preview Ole Miss's road trip to Knoxville to face the Tennessee Vols in the opener of the Southeastern Conference season for both teams. You can catch this game on the SEC Network at 5 Central on Saturday night. According to the computers, and we take an average of BPI, Bart Torvik, and Ken Palm, we don't have a line out as we're doing this Wednesday morning, but we believe the spread will be between 12.5 and 13 points in Tennessee's favor based on what the computers are saying. The computers have Tennessee as about an 89% chance to win this one. And a reminder, this preview brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. With the NFL playoffs right around the corner and the NBA season in full swing, BetOnline has you covered with all the up-to-the-second odds, news, and scores. With additional odds, lines, trends, and info on both desktop and mobile, you can access the world's best wagering information anytime. Head there today to get in on the action and to see the updated odds. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Max is the resident Ole Miss representative on the panel here. I'm struggling with words, but you know what? If you watch our channel, you know our man Max has been big on Chris Beard and Ole Miss before the season started and continues to be, as the Rebels, the only unbeaten team in SEC play. Ole Miss has been better over the last month as it's gotten all its guys back. How do you see this one as the Rebels head to Knoxville for what will surely be their stiffest test to date?
Yeah, toughest test to date. You can't put enough emphasis on that. This one, I mean, I think out of every game here, opening conference play, going to Tennessee is probably the hardest. First off, you gotta recognize Chris Beard's ability to game plan. Bryant last game was top 10 in block rate, and Beard came out in the press conference after, said, hey, we practiced all week on not getting blocked, coming to a jump stop, controlling the basketball. Bryant didn't block a single shot. So you got to look at his ability to game plan and to kind of take away the defense's strengths. You have to mention the shooting, right? Top 10 nationally in three-point percentage. I'll just list these guys off. Out of Flanagan, Morrell, Murray, Brakefield, Caldwell, and the other Murray. Out of all of them, the worst three-point shooter is Brakefield at 36%. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. And then just the last piece I'm really looking at with Ole Miss is the free throws. We know Tennessee, how aggressive they play defensively. That's their weakest area defensively, if you're looking at the numbers, is their foul rate. And Alan Flanagan, the highest usage guy on Ole Miss, actually ranks 5th in the SEC in fouls drawn per 40 minutes. So really knows how to draw contact and get to the line. You could see that play a factor, but you are at Tennessee, so you might get that home whistle. Speaking of Tennessee, Zakai Ziegler, Blake, has just been outstanding. I mean, I looked this up on Ken Palm, the offensive rating. Ken Palm will give an O rating for every game. Out of the past 7 games, Ziegler's been above 100 6 times. The first 6 games, he only did that once in the first game against Tennessee Tech. So, I mean, he's playing offensively and defensively much better, and I think Tennessee's going to be able to really crush the boards here. What are you seeing with Tennessee here, Blake? They've been playing pretty well.
Yeah, it's about time you laid off Sky Ziegler.
It's about time.
It's about time. But, yeah, I mean, this is, like we said, it's kind of a prove-it game. The one thing you mentioned that I've got circled is the Ole Miss three-point shooting, which we would not have expected them to be as good as they have been. I just want to point out that in the 5 games this season that Ole Miss has hit double digits in terms of the amount of makes, they've done it against Temple, who ranks 194th in three-point percentage defense. They've done it against Memphis, who is one of the better ones at 96. They've also done it against Cal, who's 325. They've done it against Troy, who's 285. And they've done it against Southern Miss, who's 358. So the point there is that, yes, you've made a lot of threes, but now you are going to play a team that we know is much better defensively on the perimeter. Tennessee's 32nd nationally. Three-point percentage defense teams are only shooting 29% against them. So that's what I'm curious about, to see because that's been a big part of this for Ole Miss, right? Like we said, it's just the 3-point shooting has come out of nowhere, and the ability to knock down shots from the outside has made them much more dynamic offensively. And that's just something that we were not projecting heading into the season. So can they get those same kind of looks? Can they hit the same amount of threes? If they can, they got a great chance to win this game. But again, you are going up against a team that's much better on the perimeter than some of these other teams have been that they've sort of taken advantage of in terms of, being able to make shots against teams that just aren't going to guard you the way Tennessee is. The thing about Tennessee is what they're going to push you as far out as possible to make you start your offense. We've seen that every single time. I remember the Alabama game last year is the one that stands out to me. Just thinking about how they will physically force you to play a way you don't want to play. And, I think that's going to be the biggest test here for Ole Miss, is to see if they can keep things going offensively, because they're going to need it to win this game.
All right, I've got a question for each of you, and I'll start with Max. Max, as you know, Ole Miss's roster has gotten bolstered with some guys getting eligible late, notably in the paint and at guard. So what we see in the computer numbers takes into account the whole season. It may not be what the Rebels are at the moment. How much better prepared is Ole Miss to go and pull an upset based on what it's got now, as opposed to maybe what the computers are telling us, which don't necessarily factor in some of the guys that the Rebels have had?
That's a great point, because I think the computers are still off on this Ole Miss team. I do not think they represent how they've been playing over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks or so. And I think, Moussa Cisse is obviously, a huge addition, being 7 foot, but he hasn't really put up, great numbers so far. He's still getting back into game shape. Chris Beard had said, he'll have a good stretch of 5 minutes, but then he gets tired quick, and then he'll mess up a little bit. He's only had 2 games where he's played above 20 minutes. I think the real addition here is with Brandon Murray. I mean, you get another 6'5", over 200 pounds, been in the SEC before, can really knock down a shot and play good defense. So I think that's the big addition, where the numbers are not reflecting where they should be, just because of that guard depth that you now have with Brandon Murray. But real quick, I did want to mention, before we get your take on this. You mentioned the 3-point shooting, and I think that the 3-point shooting, if say it does regress, right? Who's going to win the rebounding battle if they aren't making shots? And listen to this, with especially with defensive rebounding with Ole Miss. Against UCF, they allowed 18 offensive rebounds. Against Memphis, 16. NC State, 18. That is not going to cut it against a Tennessee team with all this offensive rebounding that they have. So I think that's another big area of this game that Tennessee is going to have a major advantage, is on the offensive glass there.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm looking down the list for Ole Miss, and we've said it. I mean, if you're just watching this video, haven't watched any of our videos before, we're very high on Ole Miss. I mean, there's a reason
Yes.
they're 13-0. How do we knock them? But this is the most physical team they played this season by far. And nothing against Memphis. They're 11-2. They're a really good team, but it's just different playing Tennessee. Like, again, you know what you're getting. And so whether it's rebounding, whether it's getting good shots, those are always the challenges, especially when you're playing on the road against Tennessee. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the biggest game of the season for Ole Miss to this point. It's the toughest game of the season to this point. And I'm curious to see how they handle that aspect of it, knowing that there's also a part of this where it's like they have won their first 13 games, and they've got a confidence that a lot of other teams don't have, just because they've not yet lost a game. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's also that aspect that can't be sort of discounted here. That Ole Miss comes in as confident as anybody because they haven't lost a game since last season. So, it's quite a setup here.
Yeah, some stats to back up what I led Max with. Brandon Murray has only played about 75 minutes this year. Of course, got eligible late. Was not a super efficient shooter at Georgetown. Effective field goal percentage is 70%. Excuse me, true shooting. That factors in free throws, which is the best on the team so far. We've talked about Cisse, I think, was the defensive player of the year last year in Big 12. Just has been awful offensively, but that's not what what they got him for. But Blake, I want to ask you something about Tennessee that stands out. And I know my bigger stats guy than you are, but it's kind of jarring looking at Santiago Vescovi's numbers. And I get that they've got more weapons this year. Dalton Connect is kind of been that go-to scorer, the transfer from Northern Colorado who can step up and give them stuff when they need it. Vescovi had to do that at times a year ago. Josiah Jordan-James has stepped up and become a bigger player. But I'm looking at some of Vescovi's numbers, and they're very un-Vescovi-like. Per 40 minutes, he's scoring about 11.5 points a game. True shooting percentage of about 56%. His numbers in the past were better. Maybe that's just a sign of a Tennessee team that's got more parts. But for a team that loses its offensive identity for stretches at a time, I'm curious to see that does he kind of flip a page over now that we're at conference play?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps. I mean, I still think, he's just not their top offensive player this year.
Yeah.
Whereas the past couple of years, he's probably had to be that most of the time. This year, he's not. I mean, Connect is clearly their best offensive player overall. Sure, the last 2 or 3 games he hasn't scored as much, but if you're getting down to it, you're going to get the ball probably to Dalton Connect. But the thing is, you've got options. I mean, I would still be fine getting it to Vescovi. So it's just different. It's just a different kind of dynamic this season than it's been in recent years, and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Knowing that you have another guy that probably does have a few more tools in terms of like the overall offensive game, and so he's just been having to play it a different way. That is Vescovi. So no, I think it's a good thing. I mean, he's still been pretty consistent outside of struggling. The North Carolina game's one that stood out, right? I mean, he didn't score. He had 4 fouls, only played 14 minutes. But still had 21 against Kansas, had 12 against Illinois, played a big part of that. I think the foul numbers have been a little more. He's had, I don't even know what the numbers are, but there's been several games where he's been in foul trouble. So maybe you attribute some of it to that, but I'm not that concerned about Vescovi. I just think that he's playing a different role this season than he has in years past.
Yeah, he's averaging about a little over 4 fouls per 69 possessions, which is about what you get in a game. So that's interesting. I think that's kind of a high number for him. Probably that's going to settle in as we get further into the season, and I think his scoring will normalize a little bit too. But gentlemen, let's get your picks. Let's start with Blake. Tennessee.
I mean, I have nothing against Ole Miss. I'm just, you're playing on the road against the toughest opponent you played so far. And like I said earlier, I just think playing Tennessee is different. And if this was in Oxford, I might take a chance on picking Ole Miss here. I might actually do it. But I just think this one's on the road. And I just think sometimes when you play Tennessee, it's just kind of like a rude awakening. And I'm going to pick Tennessee. So,
yep, I am in agreement. Going to pick Tennessee to win outright. I do think that if the spread is out there at 13-ish,
I would take Ole Miss.
I do think that's an Ole Miss cover. But if we're going to win the game, I think you have the easier path to victory for Tennessee, where Ole Miss is going to have to really shoot the lights out against a good team and really going to have to get to the line with Flanagan and being aggressive. And I just think the boards, the defense, easier path to victory for Tennessee at home here.
Yeah, agreed. I like the Vols to win outright. I think 12.5 and 13 is a lot, considering that, again, some of that's baked in with what Ole Miss hasn't had, which it now has. But then again, we have seen Tennessee obliterate good teams in that building too. So anyway, thank you for watching our preview of Ole Miss and Tennessee. We're Southeastern 14, presented by BetOnline.